What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast, where we talk about everything related to men's health, physical health, spiritual health, and of course, male enhancement, penis enlargement. We discuss it all. Why? Because, well, I mean, this life is all about discovery and trying to figure out how to be the best possible men we can be. And I'm your host, CJ Rodriguez. I specialize in getting people into the best shape of their lives so that we can have the best lives possible. You know, it's all about thriving, not surviving, baby. And that's what we do here on the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast, is just learn different things, different modalities, and find the solutions to whatever it is that may be troubling us or whatever it is that we want to overcome, whatever challenge might come up. That's what this podcast is all about. And today is no different. Today is no different because this is something that I think is pretty insidious. I think it's something that, you know, it may be legal, but I don't think that alcohol really is doing us any favors. And Sean Robinson is all about talking about his story and his vulnerability to discuss the subject and the transparency about how he overcame it. I mean, I find it to be a really, really, really inspirational story, right? Years back, I struggled with alcohol myself. You know, luckily I was able to kick it, you know, and just kind of get rid of that habit. But I've talked to a lot of people who have studied or struggled with alcoholism, and it's not pretty, man. It's difficult. And the reason why I think it's so insidious is that it just kind of creeps up on people, right? And that's what Sean discussed in his story, is about how, like, you know, it was just kind of like a thing that was culturally accepted. It's just something you did, you know? It's like, hey, you know what? We're going to go out for a couple of drinks. One turns into 6, you're drinking alone. Things are getting worse and worse. And sometimes, you know, it can creep up on you, and you've got a family and you should be doing things that, you know, you should be more responsible, but you're like, you know, I'm still drinking. I'm still getting a couple shots in. It's not a big deal. And he discusses exactly why it is a big deal and how it can really get pretty bad, right? And how he can turn it around too. And that's what I love, man, is that it's a story about victory. He came out victorious. He came out on the other side, a champion, beating this, kicking this habit. And now he's sharing how to do that with others. And the other thing that he discusses too is his weight loss, you know, all the other benefits that he got from just getting rid of this habit. Like I said, it doesn't really leave you with anything positive. And the more I read into alcohol, read into the microbiome and how it just destroys your gut flora, I'm like, gosh, man, this really isn't that good for you. You know, and I understand a lot of people will drink socially, like a couple of drinks here and there. And even myself, you know, I think I had maybe over the holidays about three, four drinks, something like that. And is it going to kill me? No. I mean, can you still enjoy this life? 100%. But it's when it starts to creep into like an everyday thing, or when you can almost, you know, people are like, yo, you an alcoholic, bro? And it's like, nah, man, not me. I mean, I only drink every now and again. And again, it's one of these things that creeps up on us. And that's why I think it's, like I said, it's an insidious thing, man. It's an insidious thing because we think it's no consequence, but it is. And luckily, Sean Robinson talked about it. And again, all the links are always in the description. And I really hope you enjoy this conversation. And if anybody is struggling with alcohol or alcoholism, you know, be sure to check out Sean Robinson's links. You know, he's got a book. He's got all kinds of good stuff that he discusses there, and a whole bunch of resources that I think can make a positive impact in your life, which is what this podcast is all about, right? Trying to help dudes make sure that they can live their best possible lives. So I really hope that you guys can take that information, run with it, apply it to your life, and hopefully make your life better because of it, right? So again, that's what we're all about. And before we jump on in, if you got any questions about, you know, getting shredded, PE, any of that good stuff, you can be sure to reach out via the DMs at masculine_health_solutions.pe. That's where a lot of you guys will find me. And for a lot of dudes that are coming over from TikTok, I know like you can't really message from there. And I mean, I was just messing around, but it seems like a lot of people discovered me there. I'm like, oh, that's crazy. But if you do want to send a message, you can do it there or at CJ Rods Fit. Right. And that's just the fitness account. And again, if you're looking for fat loss, all that good stuff, be sure to send me a DM and we'll get started. Also, be sure to check out the links in the description of this podcast. You know, I've got all this stuff there as well. If it is something that you want to pursue and you're ready to take your life into the best direction possible in regards to your physique, man, that's what I do. And that's what I love to do, right? So It's what I studied for too. And I love getting people into great shape. It's what I do, man. I'm passionate about it. And if you want to learn more about that good stuff, then be sure to hit me up there too. Again, all the links are in the description. And if you just want a consultation in regards to PE and you just want to talk about it, I had a lot of guys, asking me questions that I'm finding like patterns in certain regards. And that's kind of what I'm going to focus on in the solo cast that I'm going to be doing in the future. And again, just keep sending me that because it's great information, it's great feedback, and it kind of lets me know what you guys are on about and want to learn more. So again, this is just my opinion, and I love sharing it with you guys, and I love the fact that we have almost like a mini community, man. It's great. So that being said, enough of my yapping. Let's jump on into today's podcast with Sean Robinson, all about overcoming alcoholism. Let's go. Before we get started, one more thing. If you want to get any PE gear, be sure to check out TotalManShop.com. That is TotalManShop.com. And use the promo code MHS2020. Promo code is MHS2020 and get 12% off. Be sure to check out their wide variety of all kinds of good quality PE equipment. All right? And that's promo code MHS2020 for 12% off. And the website, once again, is TotalManShop.com. What is going on, guys? Welcome to another wonderful episode of the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast, where after a couple technical difficulties, we finally were able to connect. And thank God that Sean Robinson is here to tell us about some of the hardships he had to overcome in this life and how we could probably apply it to a lot of the different dudes that may be listening to this podcast. And if you know somebody that is going through it. But first and foremost, Sean, how are you today, man?
Good, CJ. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I'm doing fantastic. And I can't wait to dig into your story. So if we could, just backtrack a little bit to, a little bit of your life and what got you started down the path that led you to where you are currently?
Well, definitely. Let's get into it. So right now I'm 39 years old. I've got a wife and 3 small children underneath 10 years old. The older 2 are boys. My youngest was born the end of 2020. And that was pretty much where I found myself at, I'll call my rock bottom. Basically, I was 320 pounds. I had a lot of toxic routines with drinking, with overeating, with no exercise. And it just turned me into a very negative, cynical, jealous, envious, all like person that just, I was guilty mindset. I was all the things that we shouldn't be if we're trying to be better people. And I just thought I knew what I had to do to get out of it and didn't do any of those things, didn't find the pieces that I could put together to get out of it. And at the end of 2020, when I was that 320 pound negative person, I started to journal because I didn't know what else to do. I'm a construction electrician. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I've been doing both for about 20 years. And I just thought I had to fix it myself. I thought that the only way for me to get over it was to just find a way to do it on my own, because that was what I was led to believe by the circles I was in, the people I was around, and a lot of the environments and that tough and masculine environment that just said, if you're not going to man up, you're not going to fix it, you're not going to get out.
That's interesting, but what then made you finally say to yourself, like, hey, you know what? I can't fix this myself. How do I go about changing this?
When I was in that darkest moment, mentally, physically, and started journaling, I really beat myself up in this journal. I took to this paper and just wrote whatever thoughts I needed to, whatever I was feeling down, in such a way that I didn't need to justify it to anybody, right? It's all what journaling is, but I wasn't going to talk about it to people because, in my mind at that time, men don't do that. We don't keep a diary. We don't like those things my buddies would have eaten me alive for. So when I started documenting these things and putting them down, I found that I felt a lot better getting them out there and started to transition that into a few other things I could try. And ending 2020, I decided to start with Dry January 2021. I did everything I could to put it off as long as possible, and I started on the 4th because that was the Monday after all the holidays and the last stat holiday on the Mondays or whatever. So I started on the 4th and was going to do Dry January, stay, and just really opened up to trying a few different things that I'd never done before.
That's super interesting because, I mean, you actually stuck through with the January, changes that most people don't. So it's wonderful that you actually stuck with it, and obviously it changed the trajectory of your life big time. But one of the questions that I had in regards to that was, what actually got you, down the path of alcohol addiction in the first place? Where did that really come from for you?
A lot of it I felt was my habits and routines with it. But like when I was growing up, it was everywhere. Like my parents were young. They were 20, 21 when they had me. And I have two younger brothers, but as we grew up, they had that young lifestyle. They had the young friends and the get-togethers at the house and the different parties and functions, and alcohol was everywhere at that time. Like I knew how to mix a drink when I was 8 or 9 years old, and then it's all fun after the function because in the moment there's music, there's good times, and we're not participating as kids, but it's there and it's cool and it's abundant. So as I grew up, and then we're playing games with collecting all the beer cans and crushing them, helping crush them, and we'll guess how many cans are in for the bag for a prize before they go back for the deposits. And there was a lot of what seemed like innocent fun around it, and I developed my own habits and routines based on that environment I grew up in. And when I was in college, I worked at a local liquor store, and I had it in my mind at that time all the cool, colorful, fun new things that would come out for the summer or the winter, Christmas time. Like I had to try these things, and I always have an abundance around. The cooler was always stocked. There was going into the weekends that didn't have any, it was habits that I picked up from over the years that led me into that. And that was only going to compound into something worse, right? I was fine with it, but I had a pride in me, like I think a lot of men do. Like I can handle my drinks. I can drink this much and not have a problem. Being hungover, you feel like it's fine because I don't throw up and I'm good the next day. But there's a lot of things we don't pick up on. Like I'm realizing being sober for 3 years, but like the hangover I would get, maybe the alcohol and like the sleepiness and headaches weren't happening, but like I was.
Firmtech.com. I know you guys have heard of it because we have had Dr. Elliot Justin on the show before talking about just exactly how this wonderful piece of equipment works. And if you didn't know, well, the Firmtech ring actually tracks your nocturnal erections via the app. You just wear it at night, get the data, wham bam and thank you ma'am. You actually have real legit data showing you how you are in regards to your penile health. And the other thing too, if you just want to get somewhere, you're like, hey, you know what? I want my dick to be a little bit harder, a little bit stronger, and have some more intensive orgasms and erections. And I can tell you that firsthand because, well, I got both. And that is the Firmtech Max Performance Ring. This one's cheaper, right? But you can always use both depending on what it is that you are after, right? So be sure to check it out, firmtech.com. Use the link in the description to support the show. And again, be sure to get the most out of your sex life with the hardest cock possible at firmtech.com.
Asshole. My kids did not deserve the version I was giving them with my impatience and with all these things. And I think a lot of that led me to that point at the end of 2020.
It's interesting, yeah, because I mean, that was going to be my next question to you was, when was it that you finally realized like this is too much? Was it just the fact that you were looking at how you were treating your kids and your wife at the time? Or was it something else where you kind of felt the rumblings of, hey, you know what? I don't feel good drinking. I don't like the person that I'm becoming, / I don't like the way that I'm treating my kids. What was it really for you, like that one moment where you're like, you know what, this has to stop?
There was a lot leading up to it and I didn't even realize that it was maybe the alcohol, and maybe that was just a piece of it because I was able to go over a few things since this journey started. But like I've always been up and down in weight, the yo-yo effect, try something for a while, it works, get down some weight and then put more than that back on. Like I lived that forever. So getting to that point, I tried a few January resolutions. You're right, they don't normally work. This time, I stuck with it, but I was becoming a person that I grew up not liking with the environments that I was in. And with my impatience to my kids, with yelling and like never physical, but there's a lot of emotional stuff with the way that we find ourselves yelling and not spending certain times. And I was not doing these things. And these hangover days, it was like, don't come near me on in the morning because I gotta have coffee first, or I gotta do this. And it was creating a toxic situation with my relationship. And it was fine with my wife because I didn't know until much later that it was getting as bad as it was. And I think deciding to change because I was that 320-pound person and I was feeling all these things and knew it wasn't working, and kind of upset about how I felt after the holidays. And there wasn't one incident that came up, but it was just an accumulation of an amount of years of this toxic habit routine. And like I said, it wasn't just alcohol, it was like eating, it was all these things. It was like I was that person I didn't like and needed to make some sort of change. That journal, I was not nice to myself in the journal, and I couldn't do that forever.
It's interesting though that you decided to journal, and a lot of people, well, a couple guys that I've talked to said the same thing. Me, myself, I have a hard time sitting there journaling. So like I'll do the meditation and I'll kind of like, try to, bring myself back to self and all that kind of stuff. But the journaling, it's very interesting that you mentioned the fact that you were probably being kind of a dick to yourself, right? But at the same time, it's almost like that harsh truth that gave you that reflection that you truly needed to really get you started down that path. I find it interesting that journaling has come up again and the fact that you employed it and used it to your full advantage. But what were some other strategies or other things that also helped out in getting you started with this journey?
When I was getting started, I wasn't reading the books. I wasn't listening to podcasts. I had, coming from construction and firefighting, those masculine spaces, and nobody's talking about, maybe now they are, but not when I started. We weren't talking about it much. So I just needed to figure it out on my own. I thought I needed to do something. And the journaling part led me to realizing that maybe if I can journal, maybe if I can not drink, I can do other things I'm not used to doing. So I started to look into different books and audiobooks. Like my commute to work is 45 minutes to an hour each way. So I was listening to the same music, the same playlists all the time. I was kind of getting sick of that music. So I'm like, I gotta have a better use of this. So I started listening to, and I didn't even know where to start because I wasn't talking to my friends about it. But I started to find some that led me into others, and basically a big wormhole of the self-development space that I could start to pick up on a few things that other people were doing in, the like habit structure and doing things for 30 days and up to 100 days to build that new lifestyle. And through podcasts and audiobooks and then just talking to people, encouraging like other people, seeing me get to a point, and then seeing that I was a safe space. I had a lot of people start to ask me questions and talk about it. And then I was developing these new connections and new friendships that I could feel comfortable opening up to. And a lot of that stuff helped me compound the growth that I was able to do just by starting with not drinking for what was to be that month.
And how common do you think it is for most of the guys that you were working with to be drinking? Because it seems like most of the dudes in those spaces, and I can attest to it, because hey, any blue collar space for the most part, it's like, hey, let's go get that case of beer, let's go hang out after work, we'll shoot the shit and get drunk, But how soon was it that a lot of guys started to take notice of the fact like, hey, you're different, something's changed about you, you seem different, your light's different. How soon was it that people really started to notice that change? Was it like in the 30 days, 60 days? When was it?
Well, right away, January was okay because other people were doing their own wellness stuff to start the year, right? Their own resolutions. So, but by about halfway through January, when everybody else had fallen off, it was like, oh, you're still doing that? Awesome. All right. But by February, it was like, why? Like, what are you doing this for? Like, you're good. You made it a month. You're fine. Because we don't really look too closely at the people around us to really gauge how, maybe they made a decision to not smoke anymore or whatever. And it's like, you think, okay, awesome, but you don't know how that was affecting them. Like, people around me probably didn't realize how I was affected by drinking, and that like weight that I was at and all the things that made up the person I was at that time. So as it got through, it was probably more towards February where people were like asking questions and surprised I was still going. And then as the year went on, because I'd never journaled before, and it was something I maintained through that year, that is my book, which we can talk about. But that journal through that year was only because this is a space I'd never been in mentally, physically before, by not drinking. Like, I was so used to buying more than my share of rounds and celebrating with shots and being the last one up at the night. Like, my whole lifestyle was about being that, like, person that engages everybody, because that was just, you just drink. And like the environments I was in, you don't have any input on Monday if you're not talking about how loaded you got on the weekend and how hungover you were. Like, it is very much a part of just the normal vibe, the normal conversation, the normal thing of working construction. And it's almost part of the problem for sure, but it's just that you just get stuck in that. I was stuck in that habit, that routine of being that way or maintaining that lifestyle, because that's just what people around me were doing.
Well, it makes perfect sense. Again, it's an environmental factor, but I find that sometimes we just kind of get sucked into these things, and it's almost like it becomes unconscious. And to your point about the guys that in February were already like, "What do you mean you're still doing that, man? You must be crazy. What's wrong with you? Let's go get loaded." It's like, no, I'm actually taking this to heart, and I actually want to make a major change. And it's one of those things that when you're the odd man out, it's almost like people will take notice because you're so different. You're going against the grain in that environment, right? And it's almost like the coping mechanisms that everybody else has, and all of a sudden they see you and you're shining through, and they're like, something's off, something's not off, something's just different about this guy. I can't really nail it, but obviously, it's going to shine through. And which kind of I find interesting, because I find that the journal may have just been a precursor for the book that you might have just been destined to write. So what is it that led you to just say, hey, you know what? I've changed my life. I've dropped a whole bunch of weight. I'm ready to motivate and get other people on the same frequency as me. When was the moment that you said, okay, you know what? I think it's time for me to write this book?
There was a lot that happened, and it was never my intention to keep a journal to share it with anybody. There was a lot that was happening in that year. And I say year because I went dry January. It became 60 days as I learned about a habit, which became 100 days. When I got to 100 days, I thought, there's never a time in my life I will ever do this and go a full year. So with COVID and different things, I'm like, I'm going to do this for the entirety of 2021. And I maintained that journal to the end of 2021. And about October, sorry, back up a bit. My buddy was getting married, and he was in my wedding, and we had a lot to drink at my wedding. This was 10 years ago, but now he was getting married, and I was in his wedding. And every single function, there's the getting fitted for the suits and going to the different parties and the functions, you'd better drink at my wedding. You better fucking drink at my wedding. Because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how long I was going to go. I didn't know like what the plan was. I was doing this thing like each little milestone at a time. And it's like, you better be this way at my wedding. And it was such a huge thing. I was so anxious about it. Like I was always the guy, like I said, to be so supportive, and like, how am I got to stand up for him. I want to be there. I'm not going to miss it, but I'm not going to drink. And it was a huge thing. So I kept this journal through all these things and wrote these thoughts down and shared this for myself. And by about October, a friend was like, hey man, how is it going? And it was a genuine question. And I said, oh shit, I could write a book. And then like, it was just an expression for like how much has gone on in the year to that point. And I was like, I have written this thing. Like it's not for anybody else, but I'm like, there was such a hard part for me to get started. There was a lot that I wasn't talking to people. The mental health and just this whole just wellness space is so difficult for especially men to come out and talk about it and be vulnerable. So I thought, like, there's no way I can sit on this because, and I learned from listening to Ed Milet, among others, but he says you're the most qualified to help your former self. So when I started to feel that I could have used the version that I was, not only the person that I was towards the end and even now, but I could share that with who I used to be that would benefit the most. So as I finished the year that is my book, I decided, like, I'm going to own my situation. I'm going to be open and talk about it. And I'm going to share it in a way that might encourage who I used to be, because I can only speak to who I used to be, and hope that somebody picks up on the parts that maybe get them to get going.
But that's the beauty of it. It's almost like the only person that you could really help, is that former version of yourself. Well, to a degree, obviously, there's people that, go out and obviously, they do other things. But it's one of these things where we almost feel like we got to go get qualified by somebody else. You need a certificate. You need this, that, and the other. When the truth of the matter is that a lot of people, including myself, I'd rather hear from you. You've been there. You did it. Be sure to check out geltogrow.com, where all Masculine Health Solutions listeners get 30% off with the promo code MHS28. That is promo code MHS28. If you check out geltogrow.com, you can check out the balms, the ball stretchers, and coaching if that is what you're interested. So be sure to check it out to get your PE journey started the right way with the balms and all the other good things that they have. And of course, the coaching. But be sure to use the promo code MHS28. That is promo code MHS28 for 30% off. Already, you figured it out, and you came out victorious on the other side. Whereas a lot of guys, we'll go to psychologists or whatever, but you can't really connect with certain people sometimes because it's like you don't really know what I'm experiencing, right? You don't know the stigma that's attached to it. You don't know how people are going to look at me. It's almost like, sometimes even at my job, we'll joke around about, oh, here they come down from the ivory tower, right? Because like they come from the offices to visit the guys in the warehouse. It's like, we're literally cut from a different thread, man. Like, It's like the blue collar guys are over here. Literally the white collar guys are over there. Some of them can relate, some of them can't. And the ones that have the deeper connections with the guys on the floor are usually the ones that came off the floor and decided to move up, right? But, and in your case, it's the same deal. It's almost like, no, I can actually connect with this dude. He actually worked out there with the kind of guys that I got to deal with. He's been in those conversations where he's shooting this shit, talking about the UFC. How much did he get drunk on Saturday? It's like, yeah, man, these things are actually relatable, which is why I think that the book is probably something that a lot of guys can read and be like, yo, you know what? Like, this connects with me. And sometimes when we listen to other dudes who are like, hey, miles ahead of us in regards to success and in life, it's almost like you just can't really connect with them because you're like, well, you know what? I don't know what it's like to, jump out of my mansion with my Lamborghini.
Oh yeah, I didn't want to, and it went like a part of the decision because it was really difficult because I have not come from that space where it's just I grew up in that share and be vulnerable environment. So a lot of it was like, getting to the point where I felt comfortable putting that out there, that I thought I can't sit on this, think about it wherever my growth or life ends up, and then reflect on it in 5 or 10 years. Like I wanted it to be as much, quote unquote, in the trenches as I could make it. And it was like, I got to share this and just see what happens. And yeah, there was so many people that would come out later, like not the book hasn't come out yet, but towards the end, I was more confident in just sharing and being open. So there was guys that I used to work with that I'd have no idea were doing their own thing. And they were opening up like, you know what, this is so cool. Like I've done this and this. And I felt like just people have come out, and even more so since then, just to say like, you don't know who's watching, but like, keep going. Cause this is real stuff.
Yeah.
And you know what, when I started listening to podcasts, like I wasn't looking for doctors and professionals. I appreciate it now. And I think we have to, take the bits and pieces we can from all the different, professional and amateur, call it, areas, and do what we can with it. But like, I didn't want to listen to that in the beginning either. I couldn't. It wasn't where I was at mentally. I wanted
Yeah.
real.
Well, that's just it. It's kind of like that's the beauty of podcasting is that, I'll talk to, but see, and that's kind of the irony is that we kind of have preconceived notions as well sometimes. Like I've had a lot of urologists highly decorated in their fields, and they're talking to me, right? And they talk in a way which makes perfect sense. It's like, no, listen, man, listen, I deal with men all day. It's like we're all fucked, and they'll just be like, most of the guys that come in, they wait until there's a major issue to come see me. And he's like, the whole thing about being preventative and the whole thing about what you're doing too and putting this book out there, I view it as a form of prevention because you don't know who you're going to impact. You have no idea who's watching, and you have no
Mm.
idea how much of his life can change from just reading his book, hearing your story, relating to your story, and being like, you know what, maybe that journaling thing isn't so crazy as I thought it was. And maybe I'll give it a shot. And maybe I'll change my life. And maybe I'll quit drinking. Maybe I'll quit being an alcoholic. All of a sudden, you start asking yourself these different questions, and that's the impact that you can have, right? And I guess the other question, I guess that kind of I had in my mind as I was thinking about this too. It's like now that you are speaking in the public arena, right? What are one of the things that you see when people come up to you after you do your talks and they just kind of say, "Hey, can I, pull you aside for a bit and have a quick conversation?" What is the major thing that you see amongst men that's kind of like a recurring theme, I guess?
I think for the most part, people automatically feel like I'm telling people to stop drinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the especially with all my social pages, everything is like my book is called Going Dry: My
Going dry.
Path to Overcoming Habitual Drinking. And people will ask about the going dry part because that's my tag on most of my social stuff. But even though that was my catalyst for change and that's like where I started and what I named my book, it's like it's not about just not drinking. And in my book and in that journal, it is about the year. Even though I've continued to be sober, I maintained through this entire book that it was a break because that's where my mind was at the time. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
taking this break. I'm going to do this break for a year. And even though I've decided to maintain it for the sake of that me getting started, that me carrying through and going through all those things, it was a break all the way through. And then the challenge at the end, not to give anything away, speaks to how can you make this about you? What can
Mm-hmm.
you do for 100 days? And I think the most thing I get is people think I'm telling them not to drink or I'm judging the drinking. Like, no, this was just what I went through. You have to take, no, if it's mine or whoever's, just that piece that you can relate to, and then decide where you want to go from there. So the biggest thing is about not drinking. The other thing that I get questions on is just about habits, right? Like
Yeah.
how would you break something bigger down into smaller pieces that we can, you know, be successful with? And I think it's cool to work through that with people as I've had to work through it, just to, because we think so big, and that's why those resolutions don't work, because we want to lose 100 pounds. Like if I would have put my goal to lose 100 pounds, I would have never done it. I
Yeah.
wasn't looking to lose 100 pounds. I just wanted to be healthier. And then before I knew it, through exercise and diet, like I'm down this point, I'm thinking about making bigger goals.
Yep.
Like it took me 3 years to lose 100 pounds, and it wasn't, it was hopeful, but I couldn't make that big goal. It had to be smaller.
And even then, I mean, because that's that's my wheelhouse. I do coach people in getting into shape, and one of the questions I always get from guys is like, "How long till I see my abs?" I'm like, okay, we're starting about 25% body fat. You've been eating bad for the past 20 years. It's like we got to look at it more from the micro and then focus on the macro after we've already passed different stages and different levels. And that's one of
Mm-hmm.
the issues that you will find is that people think they can undo 30 years of whatever habit it is overnight. And I'm like, it just doesn't work like that. The only way that I've found in myself, like in the research that I've actually looked into, is like if something traumatic happens to you to the point where it's like it literally shifts your paradigm and your approach to life like that. But it's the kind of traumatic things that most people don't want in their lives, right? It's like, hey, I just saw my friend die from being an alcoholic right next to me. He left from the same party and he's dead now.
Mm-hmm.
That'll make somebody say real quick, like, okay, I'm done with alcohol, right? But for most of us, usually in most situations, it's not the case. And even then, I've known people myself where it's kind of like, got drunk, died on a motorcycle, and his best friend is drinking at his funeral because that's how he remembers his friend. And even then, everybody's a little bit different, right? But
Yeah.
I think it's important that we do focus on the fact that it's about the little steps first. And I did want to ask you about that. What was the first initial goal that you had in regards to fat loss? Was it just stopping the alcohol from all the excess calories of drinking? Or was it something in particular that made you say, okay, I'm going to hit this first and then work on that? What did your strategy look like, I guess?
Well, like I said in the beginning, I didn't have a strategy. I needed to not be 320 pounds and miserable anymore. So alcohol seemed like the first step that just made the most sense because of all those mornings and all those overeatings and late night snacking and all the things that it
Yeah.
brought. It wasn't until later that I learned, some addictive, because I didn't feel like I was addicted, but there was definitely some moments that I looked back on like, wow, yeah, that was probably pretty bad. And so by removing alcohol and then removing that late night snacking and then just going at that 100-day mark at a time, like even just brushing my teeth, like I started keeping track because everything that I was working on, I had on my calendar. Everything had different circles and scratches and marks and notches. And if I didn't want to tell anybody about it because it was on the wall, I didn't have to. I didn't have
Yeah.
to be vulnerable if I didn't want it. I knew what all the little marks meant. But brushing my teeth, I'd check mark in the morning, the top of the box, and then check mark at the bottom. And every day I did it, and just doing that for 100 days. And the drinking, I was doing that, and everything was this mark. Drinking more water, not eating sugar. There was a period I went, that term, not eating sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Exercising, like when I started exercising, like obviously you're in this space, people telling you like, oh, it's so much, I don't know how to do it. Like, how do I just lift max reps and not, how do I not see my abs in 3 weeks? Where it's like I had that too, and it was like, I just wanted to do one sit up. If I did
Mm-hmm.
one sit up, I could mark it on the calendar as a win. But then that one sit up just got me going. It just got me started. So, for the last, I've been marking it still, but for the last 300 days, I've been doing 50 sit-ups every night before I went to bed. And it all started as just one. If I did one, it was a win. Now I don't check mark it if I don't do at least 50.
Mm-hmm.
But everything that with diet and exercise, I just started small and then just started, rewarding as all the stuff on habits, like just reward yourself for getting started, but then add to it once you're comfortable with it.
That's super interesting. Yeah, just kind of taking the micro, working with it, and then just kind of having that snowball effect really take place is kind of the way that I see it, which is a great strategy to go about things. Because even for myself with certain clients, right, there's certain guys where it's like, okay, you know your way around the gym. I can hit you with a whole bunch right off the hop. Then there's other guys where I'm like, dude, I got to do one at a time, right? Because we're undoing a lot of bad habits and some things we might have to replace in the near future as well, right? So that's kind of where that difference in the approach makes the most sense. And the beauty of it is that you knew that you had to get started, and you're almost just like, okay, well, what's step one? And you weren't looking
Yeah.
at level 50, and you weren't comparing yourself to people that were already at like level 50, level 10. My other question is in regards to alcohol. When you went dry, did you find that you had to replace it with something? Or did you just kind of say, hey, I'm cutting it out and I'm just going to find something else to do in those situations? Because if it was integrated into your life so much, I figured that there were probably times where you're like, okay, I'm missing out, or, I could just have a brew while I watch the hockey game. What did you do in those situations? You replace it with something else, or what did that look like?
There was a lot of pressure from all the circles I was in, family, friends. Like at one point, I turned down a beer, and my own brother was like, "Oh, you don't have your coin yet. You can't have a beer with the guys." And it was, just a lot of pressure. So um, when I started, I set some rules out for myself, and it was kind of in the early stages. I started listening to some podcasts, and I started thinking, accountability and like I made these rules, and some of it was just experience, and basically one was, I still want to go out. Like I didn't want to just barricade myself in the house and just do this thing on my own. I still wanted to be out and be involved. And then, another was like, just don't be that guy in the corner flipping the water bottle around, feeling like everybody's judging, you're judging everybody. Because I seen these people when I was the drinker, right? Like, so I like people at a function would just be there to be there and twist a water bottle around in their hand while they're waiting for an opportunity to leave. So I just knew enough not to be that person. So I had a thought of the sober, judgy person in the corner already on my mind, and I didn't want to be that person. So I wanted to show up. I wanted to try and act like I was, or at least have a good time. Encourage myself to not feel so bad about it. But yes, what was I going to do? Because I wasn't wanting to go directly to the 0% or near beer options, because I was trying to remove that mechanism. I was trying to remove that thing where I had to bring all this stuff to a function, or I had to maintain this like ridiculous drinking pace all night. So I bought a mug. I had one of like a Yeti mug, and I was pouring whatever I wanted in it. I could put in water, I could put in whatever, sparkling waters and different things. And it was just a way for me to still have that, like, still do the mechanism, still have the drink in my hand and stand there with the drink like everybody else, still be sipping on something. It's not like you're holding that bottle of water where it's so obvious that you're not doing something. Even if I poured it in one of the red cups that everybody else was using, like, it just was something that I could do. And by not having the near beer, it was like taking that entire feeling away. I think it was like 9 months or something before I even started to have those, because I felt like it had been that long, and because it wasn't as like I wasn't as triggered to get back into it just by having one. Like, it was 9 months felt like a fair test where I could be like, okay, let me try one of these at dinner and then just see how it feels. So having that mug and still sipping on something was a big way to kind of avoid some of those pressures. And then I would learn that most people around me didn't care what was in the cup, right? Most people are just trying to be good hosts. And I was more worried about what I was drinking than anybody else around me. So that was a big thing that I picked up on.
Which is kind of the truth. It's like, I certain people that I've trained to, and it's kind of, they worry about the gym. They're like, oh man, people are going to judge me. They're going to do this, do that. I'm like, let me tell you a secret about the gym and any other social like activity in life. For the most part, people do not care, and that's almost like we create these projections in our own minds about how I'm going to be judged or how people are going to perceive me, only to have it to come full circle and then realize, like, wait a minute, these people don't even care. They don't even know I exist right now. And yet, it's like, here I am stressed out about it.
It's that spotlighting effect, right? It's we naturally feel like when we enter a room that everybody's thinking about us. We're the center of that attention, and it's everywhere we go. But if everybody's thinking that, like, how could we all be thinking about one person when we're worried about what everybody else is thinking? So as soon as we realize kind of that situation's going on, we kind of get out of our minds a bit and say, like, no one's going to remember me in this room tomorrow, let alone in 2 weeks. I don't have to, unless you're doing something outrageous, but really we all blend in more than we think we do.
And that's the thing. It's like, nobody really has the time or the energy to worry so much about, hey, I wonder what Sean's up to right now. I wonder what he's drinking in that cup. Let me go investigate, because I don't think that's beer, right? But the other thing that I was wondering about in this whole process, who did you lean on the most for support, and how did they go about supporting you and seeing that you were making these changes, you were sticking to it, you were a man of your word? Who gave you the support that you needed sometimes when you were feeling low or feeling like you didn't have all the energy to go through with it?
Well, my wife has been great through the whole thing. Like, we having 3 young kids, she didn't drink, obviously, through like her pregnancy, but then when she was breastfeeding, she also didn't drink. So we had some good times in college and whatever, but then it was like, when we were having kids, she wasn't drinking, which was almost worse for me, because then I could every function, and I had a driver. So she would drink, or she wouldn't drink. But then when I started to not drink, like, she was already really not. So she was great, like, been awesome support. But really, there was a few moments that come up in the year that really I became the person for myself, right? I was super stubborn in the beginning, probably still a bit in different ways, but in the beginning, especially, like, I wasn't ready for advice from anybody. I wasn't ready from that encouragement from anybody. I didn't want someone to, like, be behind me, pushing me to continue, like, anything, weight loss. Like, it was like I had to get out of my own head first. So when I was going to a function, a work thing with some buddies, and I wasn't drinking. I knew I wasn't going to be drinking. I didn't need to have anybody behind me, because that was just, I would know. And a buddy was like, oh, you're going to get you gonna do shots with us this weekend? You gonna drink? And I was like, no, man, you know that I'm not doing that. And then like, I'm still gonna have a good time. Like, you're not gonna know. Like, I'll still be out there with everybody. I'll be doing all the things. I'm just not doing the drinks and shots. So don't feel bad. Just don't buy me shots. And he's like, wow, but your wife's not here. It's like, my wife, like, I'm doing this for me as much as I'm doing this for my wife and kids, but like, she's not holding me accountable. I don't need to drink here because she's not here. Like, I'll know. Like, it doesn't matter if she knows, I'll know. And it was a couple of different moments around the same like that, where it's like, I need to hold myself accountable. I need to support myself when I could have easily just hit it, because I feel like the person that is in the background being my, my support system isn't going to know.
Yeah, it wasn't that you were trying to hide something. It was almost that self-responsibility piece that I think a lot of guys just miss out on, including myself sometimes. It's like, if you're on a diet, let's say, and deep down you shouldn't be having that ice cream, and you go have it, then you got to go look in the mirror and be like, you know what? I screwed up, right? And some guys will say that to themselves, and other guys will just justify it. How do you go about never justifying it? Because, I mean, the only way for you to have gone dry is for you to say, no, I'm not touching a single drink. How did you go about just making sure that you stayed on that trajectory? Like, initially you said that you were kind of stubborn, which I think is actually a good thing here, because it kept you from like, yo, I'm not screwing up and I'm not going to drink just because you guys want me to. But what was one of those like self-responsibility pieces that really kept you in line, I guess?
I think just living my entire life overweight, and even though I had my ups and downs, I never had the confidence to join the teams. So high school, I didn't join the teams. All my buddies did, the footballs and all this stuff. Like, it was, I never had the confidence to do any more than the house league stuff, and being overweight forever. And then even with firefighting, like, I've done it for 20 years, but like, I'm in the best shape I've been in 20 years where I'm at now. And like, the constant up and down, it was just such a confidence destroyer for me. And when I decided to keep going and to make this change, it was in the pursuit of not being that way anymore. So a lot of that pain and, mental that I dealt with all of that was behind me in a way that made me look for the next thing that was going to help by keeping going. And then once I found that, like, and Atomic Habits has been a great resource, as well as like a few other habits books that I've read, learning about how to reprogram ourselves, and Mindset by Carol Dweck, and just the fixed and growth mindset, like all these things I wasn't learning before, really just gave me the tools I would have never found, because the circles I was in wasn't reading. We weren't talking about books. We weren't talking about podcasts. We weren't talking about personal growth and development. And by coming out of that environment and saying, you know what, I am going to read this book, I am going to listen to this podcast, and then, becoming this, it was like I said, I was those other people I was starting to meet and get into my circle, that we were talking about these things. And once you get in an environment where it's acceptable to talk about things, that your buddies aren't going to question your sexuality, or, they're going to, tell your diary with all your crushes and, any journaling thing you might be doing, all the stuff that's contrary to all that manly stuff that they think you should and shouldn't be doing. I developed, and I think most people would develop more confidence to try those things that weren't working before.
100%. Because, I mean, we're always going to be judged to a degree by the people that are closest to us. And I've been in that boat too. It's like, why are you being overly sensitive, or why are you talking about these things? Men don't do that. However, I think that now I really feel as though more and more people are open to the idea that, hey, you know what, we are human beings. And it doesn't make you gay if, you talk about your feelings every now and again, and that's kind of the thing that gets thrown around, in the workplace. Like, oh man, what are you, a woman? Like, man up, right? But I think it's kind of like, it's a combination of the two things. Like, yes, you need to man up. You need to, like, embrace your masculine, be a dude, be strong, because that's what your family requires from you. However, at the same time, you also got to address the issues that you have. And that doesn't make you weak in any which way. It's just kind of like, if anything, it makes you stronger. Because if you're able to actually acknowledge the fact that I need help, and you can come back stronger, that only works out better for everybody around you. And that then gives license to the dudes around you who are also like, oh man, I got some issues too. Hey Sean, man, can I talk to you for a bit? And all of a sudden everybody gets rolling into it. And it's like, well, what books did you read? Journaling, what does that look like? Okay, cool. Tell me more about that. Man,
Mhm.
you've been sober for how long? And that's kind of where that conversation can really get started. Which brings
Yeah.
me to my next question is what are you looking to do next? Because you're an author now, you're a speaker, motivator, all that good stuff. But what is it that you have as far as your plans in the future? Because you're making a positive impact already. But, to what depths are we going to go to now in regards to the impact you want to make?
Well, there's always stuff that I want to work on, and a lot of this has been that process. So like I'm constantly developing and working on more of my like weightlifting and doing a lot of the definition that I haven't been doing up until this point is one of my next moves. But constantly helping my former self. So as I develop and grow, all the reasons I wasn't doing that before, I'm wanting to put out there for whoever has been following along that relates in any way. And then even it's the weirdest thing, like I'm not expecting a lot of feedback in this space because the market, I'm sure you're aware, like men aren't just like coming out and be like, oh man, that was awesome when you talked about how I should just own my stuff and admit that I've had problems, because we don't want to talk about our problems, but we're getting better. And being a face or being a voice to say like, listen, this is what I went through, this is what I'm going through, and this is what worked for me. And being that person, like you said, that's going through this stuff versus the person that's talking from the peak. I've heard on a podcast is like just speaking from the peak rather than, in the valleys. It's where my development is going, and it's where I hope to encourage my former self and anybody that can relate to some of this. And I know it's not uncommon, right? This is all normal stuff, dude stuff and weight and maybe drinking or whatever the vice is. It's like we deal with this stuff naturally.
That's beautiful, man. And I honestly, I think it resonates with a lot more dudes than you'd probably realize, in just changing your life and people seeing that, hey, you know what, like to your point right there, that was beautiful. And that the valleys, nobody wants to talk when they're in the shithole. Most of us don't, unless we've already made it to the peak and we're like, yeah, that was part of my past, rags to riches, blah, blah, blah. But it's almost like, it's not that you're embracing it. You're saying, no, it's a real thing and it plagues most of us. And I could at any time go right back there if I wanted to, because I could screw it all up. But what keeps me afloat and what keeps me on the right trajectory is the fact that, first of all, that self responsibility piece, like that's massive. And I think a lot of guys could take something away from just that alone, right, and apply it to their lives. I'm guilty of it too sometimes, where I'll make adjustments here and there and I'll be like, you know what? Yeah, you know what? If I have one cookie, it won't affect me that much. It's only X amount of calories. The next thing you know, you've had three. So, and obviously when it comes to alcohol, it's more of a slippery slope where, alcoholism is a totally different monster, in my opinion. Because, I mean, I went through it for a bit, a couple stages in my life where it's just like, oh man, am I ever going to stop drinking? But it's one of those things where you have to hold yourself accountable, and the accountability piece is massive here. So,
Mhm.
you know, on that note, I just wanna ask you one last question. If there's one thing that guys can take away from today's podcast, what would it be?
I would say if it's one thing, it starts small. I think no matter what else it is, there's lots we want to work on. If we don't break it down and start small, we'll find the pain in it instead of the pleasure, and we'll give ourselves lots of excuses not to keep going. We just won't do it.
Love that. That is the truth. I mean, you summed it up beautifully because that is the truth. I mean, again, going back to the macro and all that good stuff, and it's always good to have big, lofty goals, but if you don't take that first step, well, you're not going to go anywhere. I mean, I think it was it, what they say again? The journey of 10,000 steps starts with one. So,
Mhm.
to your point, it's like if you want to get to that destination, you got to make sure you take that initial first step. But
Yeah.
before we leave today, Sean, tell us where we can find you, give us all the links, all that good stuff.
All right. I'm at seanrobinson.ca. My website, I try to update it as often as I can. I've got all my stuff linked up. I'm on LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all the big ones. And I put out a newsletter every week from my email with showcasing podcast, personal video, a reflection on different topics. And then all my content is based around this journey I'm going on, and reaching out to whoever can come with me.
Awesome. And again, guys, the links are always in the description. I'll always be there for you guys to catch up with Sean. Sean, it was an absolute privilege to have you on the show, and all the concepts, all the things you talked about today, I truly, I love it. I cherish it. And I hope you can reach somebody that listens to this podcast and, hey, maybe change their lives. So again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yep. Thanks, CJ. I appreciate it.
And until the next episode.